What would you do if you saw Kirk Douglas get thrown out of the most exclusive restaurant in Hollywood for defending a waiter he had never met? That's exactly what happened at Chasen's restaurant on November 14th, 1961. And 35 years later, that waiter revealed why that single moment changed the entire direction of his life. It was a Saturday evening in Beverly Hills. Chasens was packed with the usual crowd: movie stars, studio executives, agents, producers. The people who ran Hollywood came to Chasens to see and be seen. The restaurant was famous for its chili, its booths, and its unwritten rule: what happens at Chasens stays at Chasens. Kirk Douglas was sitting alone in his usual booth near the back. He had just finished a long week of meetings about his next project. He was tired. He wanted a quiet dinner, a good steak, and maybe a glass of scotch before heading home. The restaurant was buzzing with conversation and laughter. Waiters in white jackets moved between tables with practiced elegance. Everything was exactly as it should be at the most exclusive restaurant in Los Angeles. Then Kirk heard it, a sharp sound, like a gunshot, but softer, the unmistakable sound of flesh hitting flesh. Kirk looked up. 3 tables away, a young waiter was standing frozen, his hand pressed to his cheek. Standing over him was a man in an expensive suit, his face red with anger, his hand still raised. The man's name was Victor Harmon. Kirk recognized him. Everyone in Hollywood recognized him. Victor Harmon was one of the most powerful real estate developers on the West Coast. He owned half of Beverly Hills. He had connections to politicians, studio heads, and people who didn't appear in newspapers. When Victor Harmon wanted something, Victor Harmon got it. And right now, Victor Harmon was screaming at a 22-year-old waiter named Eddie Vasquez. "I asked for the 1953 Bordeaux," Victor shouted, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent restaurant. "Not the 1954. Are you stupid? Can you not read a label?" Eddie stood perfectly still. A red handprint was forming on his cheek. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. He was too shocked to cry. "I'm sorry, sir," Eddie said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll get the correct bottle right away." Victor grabbed Eddie's arm and pulled him close. "Sorry isn't good enough. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I could do to you? I could make one phone call and you'd never work in this city again. You'd be washing dishes in Tijuana by next week." The restaurant was completely silent. 50 people were watching: studio executives, movie stars, powerful people who could have stepped in. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word, except Kirk Douglas. Kirk stood up from his booth. He set his napkin on the table, took a sip of his scotch, and walked across the restaurant toward Victor Harmon's table. Every eye in the room followed him. Kirk stopped directly in front of Victor Harmon. The 2 men were about the same height, but Kirk's presence filled the space in a way that made Victor take a half step back. "Let go of the kid," Kirk said. His voice was calm, quiet, dangerous. Victor blinked. "Excuse me?" I said. "Let go of the kid." Kirk's eyes didn't waver. "You got the wrong wine. That's not a reason to assault someone." Victor's face twisted into a sneer. "Kirk Douglas, the big movie star. This is none of your business. This is between me and this incompetent waiter. You made it my business when you hit him in front of 50 people. Kirk took a step closer. "Now let go of his arm, or we're going to have a problem." Victor released Eddie's arm, but he didn't back down. "Do you know who I am?" Victor asked. "I know exactly who you are." Kirk's voice was ice. "You're a man who hits people who can't hit back. You're a man who thinks money gives him the right to treat people like dirt. I've met 100 men like you in my life. You're all the same. Big and brave when you're picking on waiters. Not so brave when someone your own size steps up." Victor's face went purple with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? I'll destroy you, Douglas. I have friends in this town. Powerful friends." Kirk laughed, a cold, hard laugh. Go ahead, make your phone calls. Tell all your powerful friends that Kirk Douglas stood up for a waiter at Chasen's. See how that story plays in the papers. Victor was trembling now. Whether from rage or fear, nobody could tell. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Gerald, rushed over. Gentlemen, please, let's not make a scene. Mr. Harmon, I'm sure we can get you the correct wine. Mr. Douglas, perhaps you'd like to return to your table. Kirk didn't move. Gerald, Kirk said, still looking at Victor. This man just assaulted one of your employees in front of your entire restaurant. What are you going to do about it? Gerald's face went pale. Mr. Douglas, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Mr. Harmon is one of our most valued customers. Perhaps we can all just calm down and... Kirk turned to Gerald. Let me make this simple. Either this man apologizes to Eddie and leaves this restaurant tonight, or I leave, and I don't come back. Ever. Gerald's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Victor Harmon, one of the wealthiest men in Los Angeles. He looked at Kirk Douglas, one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He looked at Eddie, still standing frozen with his hand on his cheek. Mr. Douglas, Gerald said slowly, I think perhaps you're overreacting. Mr. Harmon has been a customer here for 15 years. I'm sure he didn't mean to. Kirk held up his hand. I heard what I heard. I saw what I saw. He pointed at Eddie. That young man was struck in the face because he brought the wrong bottle of wine. In what world is that acceptable? Gerald swallowed hard. Mr. Douglas, with all due respect, I think it would be best if you returned to your table and finished your dinner. I'll handle this situation. Kirk nodded slowly. I see. So that's how it is. He reached into his wallet, pulled out several bills, and placed them on the nearest table. For my dinner, Kirk said, and for Eddie's medical expenses, if he needs them. Then Kirk turned to Victor Harmon one last time. Men like you think you own the world because you have money. But money doesn't make you a man. How you treat people who can't fight back, that's what makes you a man. And by that measure, Victor, you're nothing. Kirk looked at Eddie. Kid, you don't have to take this. Nobody has to take this. Remember that. Then Kirk Douglas walked out of Chasen's restaurant. The next morning, Gerald called Kirk's office. Kirk was banned from Chasen's indefinitely. Victor Harmon had made his feelings clear. Either Kirk went, or Victor's entire circle of wealthy friends would take their business elsewhere. The restaurant chose Victor Harmon. Kirk never went back. The story spread through Hollywood within days. Some people thought Kirk was a hero. Others thought he was a fool for making an enemy of Victor Harmon. The newspapers never picked it up. Chasens had a strict policy, and reporters who wanted access to the celebrity clientele knew better than to write about what happened inside those walls. But Eddie Vasquez remembered. After that night, Eddie quit his job at Chasens. He couldn't work there anymore. Every time he walked past Victor Harmon's usual table, he felt sick. Every time Gerald gave him an order, he thought about how the manager had chosen money over basic human decency. Eddie had saved some money. Not much, but enough. He moved to a small town outside Los Angeles and got a job at a diner. The pay was worse. The customers weren't famous, but nobody hit him for bringing the wrong wine. For the next 10 years, Eddie worked his way up, busboy to waiter, to assistant manager to manager. He learned everything about the restaurant business. He learned what worked and what didn't. He learned how to treat customers and, more importantly, how to treat employees. In 1971, Eddie Vasquez opened his own restaurant, a small place in Pasadena, nothing fancy. Good food, fair prices, and one rule that was posted on the wall of the kitchen where every employee could see it. Every person who walks through that door deserves respect, customer or employee. rich or poor, famous or unknown. We treat everyone with dignity, no exceptions. Eddie's restaurant was a success. He opened a second one, then a third. By 1985, Eddie Vasquez owned 12 restaurants across Southern California. By 1990, he had expanded to 25 locations. By 2000, he was one of the most successful restaurateurs in the state. But Eddie never forgot the night at Chasens. He never forgot the man who stood up for him when nobody else would. In 1996, 35 years after that night, a journalist was writing a profile of Eddie Vasquez for a business magazine. During the interview, the journalist asked Eddie about his management philosophy, about why he was so famous for treating his employees well. Eddie was quiet for a moment. Then he told the story. The journalist was shocked. Kirk Douglas? The movie star? Eddie nodded. I was 22 years old. I was nobody. A waiter at a fancy restaurant, getting paid minimum wage plus tips. And one of the most powerful men in Los Angeles slapped me across the face because I brought the wrong bottle of wine. Eddie's voice grew thick with emotion. 50 people saw it happen. Movie stars, producers, people with more money than I'd ever see in my lifetime. And nobody did anything. Nobody except Kirk Douglas. The journalist asked what Kirk had said. Eddie smiled. He said, "Kid, you don't have to take this. Nobody has to take this. Remember that." Eddie looked around his office, at the photos on the wall, at the awards, at the evidence of everything he had built. I remembered. Every day for 35 years, I remembered. Every time I wanted to give up, I heard his voice. Nobody has to take this. Every time I had the chance to treat someone badly because I had power and they didn't, I thought about Victor Harmon. I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be. Eddie paused. Kirk Douglas didn't just stand up for me that night. He showed me what courage looks like. He showed me that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you. He got banned from his favorite restaurant for defending a waiter he'd never met. That's not a movie. That's real life. The journalist asked if Eddie had ever contacted Kirk Douglas to thank him. Eddie shook his head. I tried once. In 1975, after I opened my first restaurant, I wrote him a letter, told him everything, told him what that night meant to me, told him about the sign I put in my kitchen. Did he write back? Eddie reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a worn piece of paper, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. He wrote back 3 sentences. Eddie held up the letter so the journalist could read it. Dear Eddie, I remember that night. You didn't need me to stand up for you. You already had the courage. You just needed someone to remind you it was there. Keep fighting. Kirk. Eddie carefully put the letter back in the drawer. I've carried that letter for 20 years. It's the most valuable thing I own. When Kirk Douglas died on February 5th, 2020, Eddie Vasquez closed all 47 of his restaurants for the day. He put a sign on every door, "Closed today in memory of Kirk Douglas, the man who taught me that everyone deserves respect." The local news picked up the story. A reporter asked Eddie why he was closing his restaurants to honor an actor he had met only once, for less than 5 minutes, over 50 years ago. Eddie looked at the reporter and smiled, because sometimes 5 minutes is all it takes to change a life. Kirk Douglas saw a young man being treated like nothing, and he decided that young man mattered. He gave up his favorite restaurant to make that point. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything. He just did the right thing because it was right. Eddie wiped his eyes. I've spent my whole life trying to be worthy of what he did that night. 47 restaurants, 3,000 employees. Every single one of them knows the story. Every single one of them knows that we treat people with respect, because a movie star once stood up for a waiter at Chasens. Eddie looked at the closed sign on his restaurant door. That's Kirk Douglas's legacy. Not the movies, not the awards. The people he stood up for when nobody else would. The lives he changed without even knowing it. The man who never bent. The man who never forgot that everyone deserves dignity. And the waiter who spent his whole life passing that lesson on.